From Chicago's Can TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
Well, hi there. Welcome back to Chicago Newsroom. I'm Ken Davis. So remember the mega scandal that ripped apart the RTA earlier this year? The one that ended in the executive director being fired, the chairman of the board replaced, a bunch of board members losing their seats. And that house of cards started tumbling when the now former executive director apparently complained that he was being pressured to give someone a raise. And that pressure was coming, it was alleged, from House Speaker Madigan. So whatever happened to that guy, the guy who wanted the raise? Well, according to the Sun-Times' Chris Fusco, he left Metra, and the Quinn administration, at Madigan's recommendation, hired him as a $70,000 a year labor relations administrator. Oh, and he gets another $57,000 because he's retired from the city of Chicago. So what would be your chances of landing a deal like that if you just walked in through the front door? You know, I mean, if you applied for one of these jobs at the personnel office. Well, those chances might be enhanced if you did some political work in the 13th Ward Democratic Organization, maybe. It's all outlined in a very fine Sun-Times piece written by Art Golub and our guest today, Chris Fusco. And Chris, I'm glad to have you back on the show here again.
Hello.
Thanks for being here. And also, the yellow lights. What's the difference between 3 seconds long and 2.9 seconds long? Well, about $100 when one of those red light cameras dings you, according to David Kidwell, who's been dogging these cameras for the longest time at the Chicago Tribune. And we're really glad to have you back here again, David, because there are new developments in the traffic world, traffic management in Chicago. So I'm glad to have both of you here. Before we begin, though, it would be appropriate to mention that the Sun-Times is going through some difficulty, and a colleague of yours resigned yesterday, and it's a really kind of a sad story. You guys worked
Oh
together.
yeah, I mean, you know, and as we were saying off camera, you know, obviously everybody at the Sun-Times, myself included, hundreds of stories I've done with Dave McKinney, we all think the world of him. We wish him the best. Obviously we know what Dave put in his articulately written letter. We know what Jim Kirk put in his articulately written column. You know, there's a certain degree, I think, at the paper of survivor's guilt going on here a little bit. It's like, oh, Dave, you know, should we all follow Dave? And I don't think that's what I don't think that's what Dave wants for us or for the paper. And I think this is something. The issues that Dave's situation raises historically have happened in newsrooms across the country, right. And this one ended horribly for both sides, I think. And the question is how do we go on from here? And I think we need to be talking constructively about that. Maybe there'll be some sort of dialogue between newsroom and management about how to do that. Maybe there won't. But I think our resolve is to keep doing what we're doing. And let's try to do it for as long as we can, for as long as the paper's alive, and hopefully it's alive for a long time. So that's it, I think.
Yeah, well, you know, Dave McKinney was we should mention that he was the Springfield Bureau editor, and there was a big dispute, which you can follow. It's all over the place. You can read about it yourself. But we just happened today to have one of his close colleagues on the show today, and it would be ridiculous for us to sit here and talk without mentioning that. So
sure.
I think we all wish Dave the best, and I have to say I wish the Sun-Times the best, because you guys are a vital part of this show, and the work you do is something that I hope our viewers really appreciate, and I don't want to see that jeopardized. So onward. So David Kidwell, one would believe, if one reads what you're saying, that the city of Chicago is almost like kind of mafioso, like engaging in entrapment stuff to get people to pay tickets that they ordinarily wouldn't pay. I mean, you almost can't come to any other conclusion. It's like, we talked to you before about this, but all right, back us up a little bit and tell us about this yellow light thing. Okay, so there's one contractor that's providing the cameras, and then the last time we talked to you, that was being transitioned. There's a new camera company coming in, and there's a little tiny clause in the contract, right?
Right. Well, I mean, the city made a very interesting decision in the middle of. I mean, we had been covering this corruption scandal involving the previous contractor, the original contractor, on the red light camera deal, Red Flex Traffic Systems, has now been charged. The former CEO has now been charged with paying up to $2 million in bribes to the guy at City Hall who was in charge of oversight and helping to bring them to the city. But when they were transitioning, because of that scandal, to a new company called Xerox State and Local Solutions, the city made the decision to change the way it defined what constitutes a traffic ticket. So before, if a red light camera ticket came in and it showed, and the video showed that the yellow light was below 3 seconds, for 10 years they've been throwing those out routinely.
Not ticketing at all.
Yeah, because the yellow light's below the standard. The the federal minimum is 3 seconds. So for whatever reason, the city decided when Xerox took over the contract in February, late February, to start issuing those tickets. And over the summer, we started getting these reports from administrative law judges. The city has like 80 contract lawyers who sit in judgment of appeals. Very few people appeal. But when they do, the judge has a number of things he has to go through before he even looks at the evidence. Is the camera operating properly? Did the technician sign the certificate? Is the yellow light long enough? And these judges were seeing all these tickets and they were routinely throwing them out. They would come in with 2.9 seconds. And that began this sort of investigation. We started looking at it very hard. I pulled all of the successful appeals since March, and literally found more than a third of them had 2.9 second yellows. So of all of the tickets that got thrown out, more than a third of them had yellows that were below the federal standards. So in September, we went to the city on a Friday and I sat down with Rebecca Scheinfeld, who's the transportation commissioner, and she told me, well, 2.9, it says 2.9, but it's really 2.99 or 2.98, and they truncated the number. It's down to a 1/10 of a second now instead of a 100th of a second, and 2.99 is really 3. It's within the standards. So I was asking them, okay, but why the change? What happened? And why haven't you conveyed this to your administrative law judges? I mean, there seems to be some disconnect. Why are they throwing these out? Couldn't answer. Well, it turns out on the next Monday they suspended that. I don't know why, I don't know what, but that they decided to go back to the way it was. And it turns out that in the end, they say somewhere in the neighborhood of 77,000 people got tickets that they wouldn't have gotten under the previous policy and under the policy that's currently in effect.
Now, there's something I just want to clarify here, because I think there's been some confusion about this. The city did not go around and retime all the lights to 2.9 seconds. It's just that some of them do run at 2.9 seconds,
It's
right?
the filter changed.
Yeah.
They turned the dial down on what constitutes a ticket.
Right. So they
were issuing more
the threshold
tickets.
of where you can get
Exactly.
the ticket. Right.
We don't have any evidence that they were out there tinkering with the yellow lights.
Yeah.
They're at the basement of federal standards the way it is.
Right.
So the only evidence we have is that they changed the criteria on what constitutes a legitimate ticket.
And it's fascinating to me because as you say, this is the absolute minimum. And there's also this other weird thing about there's a period where the lights are red in all directions too, right? So I mean that complicates things too. But so how many more people got tickets than would have gotten them if they had all been thrown out at below 3? I mean, a lot more people got tickets, right?
77,000 people. It's almost $8
that's
million.
the number.
$8 million
$8
in revenue the city would not have generated.
Right.
And not counting the 500 or so who got their tickets thrown out. What's amazing is people are now going back, right? We were hearing from people, wow, I got one, I wrote the check. I never checked, and they're seeing 2.9 on their tickets. There's lots of people out there. So, what's going to happen with those people? And we put that question to Mayor Emanuel directly, and he claims to be looking into it.
But this is something that this happened on Mayor Emanuel's watch. We so often blame all of this on Rich Daley, which we love to do, but this one's his, right?
Every time the mayor is asked about this red light scandal, the corruption, we did this story about these really weird spikes that were going on all over the city that prompted tens of thousands of questionable tickets that to this day they still cannot answer. Anytime you ask the mayor about that, he always sort of, well, that was a previous administration, I fixed it, everything's better now. But this decision, this change in the yellow light standard is his. He owns this one. And it's just interesting that this happened in the middle of all of the other stuff that's going on. I mean, they were being watched very closely and still decided. I mean, this is just another example of the kind of inconsistent enforcement that all the experts that we've talked to, 201, I can't find an expert who says any of that is fair. These cameras are supposed to modify behavior over a period of time. They are not sting operations. And so when you go out there and change things, when you tinker and you switch in what you're enforcing from day to day, or you change, that's defeating the purpose of the camera, which is to make the intersection safer by changing people's behavior. I mean, the city has said the same thing when they were selling these things. This isn't the right tickets.
Oh well,
we're here to make things safer.
Right. This is for the children.
The same argument on speed cameras too, right? Which you're not hearing as much about those speed cameras anymore, and I think the reporting on red lights has probably had a lot to do with that.
And you ask the city. The city is working very hard to avoid the topic of fairness. They don't want to go there. It doesn't matter. If you violated the law, that's your problem, right?
If you didn't go through the red light,
sting
you wouldn't
operation,
get a ticket.
no sting operation. We don't want to talk about whether it's fair. If you broke the law, you broke the law. I mean, that's their take.
Right. And we just heard in the last couple of days that there's a $50 million, I believe it is, shortfall from the cameras, but those are from the speeding cameras, right? Is that right? The speeding cameras are not performing the way the mayor wanted them to.
I think it's interesting that they define these safety programs in those terms. Shortfall.
It's a shortfall.
Right? I've had people at the transportation department literally tell me we would be happy if we never make another dime off these cameras because that means everybody's driving the right way.
Right. We invested millions of dollars just for that.
Clearly, that's when they talk about shortfalls and projected revenue from these things. Clearly, there's a competing interests there.
But it does appear to be true, right? That Chicagoans have actually just kind of figured out, oh, there's one of those cameras. I got to make sure I'm at the right speed, so the mayor wins either way. He either gets a lot of money or he gets to stand up and say, see what I've done, I've made the streets safer.
Right. Well, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, the composition, too, of Chicago's traffic patterns have changed immensely by divvy bikes, more bikes, bike lanes, and I think there's a lot of questions here, too, about whether that strategy has been kind of haphazard. The idea is the more bikes you put on the street, the more drivers are going to see they're there and they slow down, but then you look at the bike lanes and they're pothole ridden, and it's just, I think, one of the things Dave's done with these stories, and I think we tried to do with some stories a few years back about just the number of people dying in the city from pedestrian bike deaths is, this needs to be thought out maybe just a little bit better, because it seems like the strategy is kind of let's throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks.
Well, there was the transportation commissioner who Rahm Emanuel brought in, Gabe Klein, was very big on this stuff, very big on bikes and all that, and then he just kind of, it seemed to me, rather abruptly left. I don't pretend to have any inside information on that, but it seemed like the mayor kind of swapped him out quickly for some reason. I don't know if that's really true or not, but
I mean, I think he was dinged a little bit, for better or for worse, by the situation where he was consulting that company that had involvement with divvy bikes, and that thing blew up. And Joe Ferguson, the Inspector General, did some reports on that. As Dave's stories have shown, obviously the red light camera administration contract. Obviously, that's the subject now of a pretty prominent federal court indictment, and so all these programs, there is. there is big money in road construction and transit, and all the way down to a tenth of a second.
Right. There's big money in a tenth of a second. Yeah.
You know.
Okay, well, you recently, Chris, wrote a very nice piece, a very interesting piece about the role that Mike Madigan plays in everything, everything that goes on in the state of Illinois. And this is a part of this too. I mean, there are all kinds of connections into these stories, but take us down that road a little bit. Let's talk about this this little understood guy who is nothing more than just the Speaker of the House of the state of Illinois. Why is he so powerful?
Sure. I mean, we've all been writing stories about Mike Madigan for years. The Tribune had a series called the Madigan Rules, you know, at the periodic installments. And so what, you know, and last year, Dave McKinney with the Better Government Association, after the Patrick Ward scandal, the one you referenced at the beginning of the show, broke, looked at Mike Madigan's petitions and started to do with the BGA a little bit of a comparison. Well, what I decided to do was try to take a look at that on a much larger scale and look at more candidates and specifically kind of put it through the lens of campaign contributions. And that's not easy to do because state law only requires requires campaigns to disclose if the donation is over $500. So what we found as we were kind of going through these contributions is you would see one contribution, you know, from somebody that maybe gave $1,000, and then we had to go back and do some computer Excel spreadsheet work to determine whether the addresses were right and just pick up all the donations that were under $500 for those people. So we came up with a universe of nearly 250 people and $1.3 million over 15 years, and people who have, you know, government workers who at some point were employed by government who gave to Madigan campaigns. Then we started cross-referencing that with several candidates that we know Madigan supported, including his daughter, and
the Attorney General.
The Attorney General, and took a look at how many of those people have government jobs, and what we found was a ton of them do. A lot of them were on clout lists that had surfaced during the various administrations we've covered and various federal scandals, trials over the years. Yeah. And in some cases, they just had pretty incredible government deals. The lead on our story was August Olivo. He's a CTA worker, and he's retired from the Cook County Highway Department. He's got a government job. He's got a government pension. His brother is the former alderman, Frank Olivo, from Madigan's ward. And what a shock. He's given Mike Madigan, $8,100 over the past few years. And he's also benefited from a program that Madigan instituted in his Southwest Side ward through legislation that enables you to get a check from government if your house sells below a certain assessed value that's set at a certain point in time. So the Speaker's done a lot of things for these folks, I think, is what we show, but we can't show it quite on the scale with which it probably exists because it's a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah. I'm jumping around a little bit here, but when you just triggered another thought in my head. Your newspaper, the Chicago Sun-Times, still only $1, doesn't do endorsements except when they do. So you're kind of out of this a little bit, but your newspaper elected not to endorse in the Attorney General's race. And they said that part of the reason for that was because Lisa Madigan has just kind of given up on prosecuting corruption, official corruption. It was a rather scathing editorial, I thought, about why they're not endorsing her. So how does that fit into all of this? How does Lisa Madigan fit into all of this?
Well, you know what, I don't know how much, traditionally it's been the Attorney General who has been going after public corruption in this state. And I don't know that she was ever aggressively going after public corruption. But it's interesting that the chief law enforcement officer of the state also happens to be the daughter of the most powerful politician in the state. You know, this state is well known for its career politicians, but with the retirement of Mayor Daley, really the only career politician out there with the patronage army that powerful is Mike Madigan. I mean, if you want to look at the impact of it, look at the pension crisis that we're dealing with right now. a lot of that has to do with decisions that Mike Madigan made while he was building this patronage army of government employees, all of whom benefit from this pension crisis. And so, I mean, you have to look at the chicken and the egg there. You know, in January, after the Pat Ward case came up, we did our own sort of version of what you guys did.
The Metro.
Yeah, and we found it goes far beyond political contributions. He has precinct captains. We found more than 400 people who they've either contributed or they've done work for his campaign, or they've sold tickets to fundraisers, or they've gone out and got out the votes. And he's got hundreds and hundreds of public employees who every election cycle he sends all over the state. We found them at working elections in East St. Louis. So his reach goes. He is definitely the most powerful. He's the chairman of the Democratic Party. He's been the Speaker of the House for 30 years. He controls every budget, every line item in the state budget. His private business, appealing property taxes for large business, is bigger than it's ever been. And so, I mean, all of these stories we've done over and over and over again. So, you know.
It's just incredible to think about the fact that this guy is actually just a representative from the city of Chicago, generally the 13th Ward. I mean, he's
never gotten more than 30,000 votes.
It's incredible, just absolutely incredible.
But you know what, though? You can say, you know, Ed Burke is just an alderman, right?
Right,
and
that's right.
It's kind of like
right.
you got these two guys,
right.
13 and 14.
Right.
They both have a pretty lucrative property tax
Yeah,
appeal business.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
And jumping back to Lisa Madigan, I think one of the things that in kind of having to data enter these spreadsheets of petition circulators that became kind of apparent to me was, you know, had she run for governor and she made the decision not to, I think this analysis probably that I was doing would have happened a lot sooner. And when you see the number of people that are circulating for her, that are also circulating for these other Madigan candidates, it really kind of, it lets you know that her connections to her father are really hard to overcome in an election cycle, especially when the guy has been speaker, 29 of the past 31 years. I mean, like you said, it's this little tiny, burg he comes from in the middle of the Southwest side, but the power that wields and the criticism that opens her to is difficult. And, and I think it's something she's wrestled with throughout her political career. You know, Dave talked about the speaker's property tax appeal business. A lot of that is doing property tax appeals for nursing homes, which the state regulates. I know in stories that both, I think we started at the Sun-Times and the Tribune then, picked up on and expanded. Lisa Madigan's tried to crack down on nursing home owners, and it just is, it's a really weird situation, the way it all works. And it's a really sticky wicket for her, I think, if she's going to try to progress beyond Attorney General.
Well, let's look at the election a little bit. We are only a couple weeks away from the election right now. Pat Quinn and Bruce Rauner going hammer and tong. Your paper today says they're just absolutely head and head. There's no daylight between them. How does the Madigan piece fit in with this election? In the end, is he going to be able to help Pat Quinn? Does he want to help Pat Quinn? I've had this kind of weird feeling that from Rahm all the way down, the whole political class would probably be much happier with Bruce Rauner as governor. But that's just me. I don't know.
You want to take that one first?
You know what? Who knows? Mike Madigan's going to be fine, just fine.
No matter what.
Whoever takes over the governor's office. Right. He controls the budget.
Yeah.
The governor doesn't. Just doesn't.
As Pat Quinn could tell you. Right.
And Bruce Rauner, through all of his talk about taking on government,
fixing Illinois.
Good luck, sir.
Yeah.
Because he's in for a rude awakening.
Well, I
it
mean,
is the way it is, and it's going to be the way it is.
kind of processing this a little bit. You got to remember, right now in Springfield, you got veto-proof majorities in the House and the Senate. Will that change after this election cycle? Who knows? Depending on whether it does, then you put Rauner in the seat. You know, if Rauner gets in, how does that affect, you know, this kind of triangle between the legislature, the governor, and Rahm? Well, you know, you start to think back and who handled, back when there was the petition challenge for Rahm to come in, who handled that? It was Mike Casper. That's the Speaker's longtime ally, former employee. You look at Red Flex and the stories Dave's done, and you know, John Bills, who was indicted as a result of his work.
He worked for the city transportation.
He worked for the city, but he also was a key guy for Madigan.
John Bills is the prototype for Madigan's patronage army. Here's a guy who started 30 years ago
He was a streetlight fixer,
as a
wasn't he?
lamp maintenance
Yeah.
repairman,
Yeah.
and these streets. His dad was a career politician. His uncle was a career politician. His family has very, very interesting and extensive ties to the Chicago mob. One of his cousins died in the federal witness protection program. His uncle was shot by the Hook, La Pietra. But John Bills came up, grew from a lamp maintenance worker to the #2 guy in the Department of Transportation with the help of Mike Madigan. He was a precinct captain, a top earning precinct captain. He had a very strong reputation on a first name basis with Mike Madigan, on a first name basis with Mayor Daley, and that's how he grew up. And it raises some serious questions came up when we were covering the Red Flex case, and this guy is now charged with taking up to $2 million in bribes from a company on a contract that has earned the city $500 million. Now, a number of aldermen have raised this question. A number of people we've talked to, is John Bills, a lifelong bureaucrat, really the guy in control of a $500 million revenue, a contract that earned that company $124? Now, John Bills has gone off the reservation a few times in his public career. He learned in 2000, when he decided on his own to support a candidate that wasn't being backed by Mike Madigan, a friend of his, he decided to support his campaign. He contributed $500 to the campaign of Pat LeVar back in 2000 when he was trying to go against Dorothy Brown for circuit clerk. Mike Madigan didn't like it. And so John Bills found himself going from a very nice office in City Hall, handed a tape measure, working out of a trailer in the quarry, measuring offices for renovations for a year. If that gives you some idea of the reach of Mike Madigan, took him a year, more than a year, to work his way back into good graces.
He did get
well,
back.
he earned a lot of money from Mike Madigan.
Yeah.
He was a very, very influential guy in the organization.
Yeah. Well, that's our primer, ladies and gentlemen, on Mike Madigan, and that's our civics lesson today for the state of Illinois and how it works. It's just 2 words, Mike Madigan. That's the state of Illinois. Chris Fusco, thank you very much, and especially good luck to you right now. And also, I just want to say also thanks to David Kidwell for all your great work on the red light traffic and everything else that you're doing. Chicago Tribune Sun-Times, and we are so glad that we have them in the city of Chicago, because that's what journalists do, and they play an incredibly important role. Think about that next time that you're reading some aggregation, okay? You have been watching Chicago Newsroom. It's a community service of CAN TV. You can watch us anytime, but you can also check us out right here at this address. You can go here anytime at all to watch the program, and you can check us out on iTunes too. Thanks very much. See you next week with another program right here on CAN TV. Bye.